Descartes' Meditations aims to do three things, two of which he is very explicit about at the outset. If you read the introductory materials, he really emphasizes these two things. Part of the reason for emphasizing the first two is that this will make his book appealing to the Catholics. And he wants that this is a time when there's a kind of ongoing controversy between the Catholic Church and various Protestant sects, that is, groups that have declared that the Catholic Church isn't the only authority or isn't the right authority about interpreting the Bible and religion, but they want to defend other kinds of Christianity. Martin Luther, for instance, and the Lutheran Church, the Calvinists in France. There's already been what's called the the Reformation, as it's sometimes called. Which is a sort of conflict, an ongoing conflict between the Catholic Church and the Protestants. Well, Descartes was born in France, and he's trained by Catholics, and he basically wants his view to be accepted as the official Catholic view. He wants to convince the Catholics to make this the official Catholic view. To some extent, he is successful, because it's not that it soon becomes official Catholic doctrine, but rather, and parts of it eventually do become official Catholic doctrine. But very soon there starts to be an influential group of Jesuits who align themselves with Descartes' views. And so there starts to be a kind of Cartesian school of thought. When we call things Cartesian, this is maybe obvious, but we're taking just the last part of Descartes' name. Cartesian means basically having to do with Descartes or coming from Descartes. So the first two items are ones that Descartes emphasizes. That is, prove the independence of the mind from the body. And part of why this is important is because it helps to argue that the mind could exist without the body, which means that the mind could exist after the death of the body. So this is Descartes trying to argue, or this part of his set of aims is trying to argue that immortality of the soul is possible, that we could live after our death. This is also important in a modern scientific context, because there starts to be more and more elaborate physiological descriptions of human beings. Humans are understood more and more. I mean, I should put it this way. Human bodies are being understood scientifically to a greater and greater extent. And that is leading some theorists at this time to be really tempted by a materialist view. That is, a view that the only thing that exists is matter. That the only thing that exists is the kind of matter that makes up inanimate objects and also animals and plants and humans. And if matter is all that exists, then when we die, it seems like, well, that would probably just be the end of it. There wouldn't be anything left over after the matter falls apart, the matter from our bodies, so there wouldn't be any life after death. Descartes is very much in favor of the modern scientific way of thinking about things and researching things, but he doesn't want to accept the consequence that when we die, that's it, that there's nothing after our death, that our bodies just kind of fall apart, the matter of our bodies falls apart, and then we exist no more. We as an individual or as a self, right, as a mind or as a consciousness, no longer exist after death. He doesn't want to accept that. So one thing he's going to be arguing for is that we do exist we can exist after death, and there's reason to believe that we do exist after death. He's more concerned just to establish that we can exist after death. And he does that because he leaves the details of thinking why we do exist after death to the theologians, to the priests, and so on. But philosophically, he wants to say, look, there's no principal reason why we should think that our minds couldn't continue to exist after we die. And his rationale for that is going to be that our minds are not made of matter like our bodies are. So he wants to prove, again, the independence of mind from body, that mind and body are different things. And it's that the part of his motivation for that is because he wants to prove or argue that it's possible for us to continue to exist as minds or consciousnesses after our bodies die. A second thing Descartes wants to achieve is to prove the existence of God. Now, this might seem a little kind of crazy or wild to us today. How can you prove the existence of God? But there was already a discussion about whether or not the existence of God could be proven and what the best proofs or the best arguments for the existence of God are at the time. Almost everyone believed in God, or they sort of had to say they believed in God, or else they would be persecuted. Descartes is concerned here, again, in the context of modern science. Atheism has started to be more and more of a live option. There are people who can really think about the world in a purely materialist way, and they're tempted to believe that there is no God on that basis. So Descartes is concerned to show that you can be fully on board with the scientific revolution and with scientific research and also believe in God. And in fact, he wants to argue that you have to believe in God in order to do science well. Part of why this is important, though, is that Descartes, when he proves the existence of God in the way that he does, he also sets certain limits, you could say, on how we understand what God is. Maybe that's not that might not be perfectly that might not be as helpful as it sounds at first. Maybe the better way to put it is that he's going to prove the existence of God in a specific sense, and he's going to give us some guidance as to how our understanding of God should fit into our understanding of other things, our knowledge as a whole, our place in the physical world, and so on. And then the final thing that Descartes is going to try to do, partly through doing items 1 and 2, is he's going to try to establish a new foundation for the sciences and for knowledge. And again, remember, this is what he believed he was told in a dream was his destiny to do. Some people reading Descartes' Meditations think this third one is actually the main thing he's trying to do. Even though he advertises 1 and 2, he's really only doing 1 and 2 in order to do 3. That what he really counts about is what he really cares about is scientific inquiry, and he wants to defend and justify the project of scientific inquiry. But in order to do that, he needs to assure the Catholic Church that scientific inquiry can be conducted without disrupting their fundamental theological commitments. So in a way, you can read him as what he's trying to do is sort of correct the Catholic Church or make an argument that they shouldn't be doing things like persecuting Galileo, that's not actually necessary, because the only way that someone like Galileo or Descartes or others can do their science, if we understand what they're doing correctly philosophically, the only way they can do their science is under the assumption that there is a God and that there's a distinction between the mind and the body such that the mind can live forever. So that might be a little bit much to be conveying to you at the outset here before we've actually read much of the Meditations in detail, but I do want to let you know a little bit about where he's going and what he's trying to do. Just a few other items I want to mention briefly about the text. The text is presented in this genre known as a meditation. This genre already existed as a kind of spiritual literature at the time. Nuns and monks would write meditations which were designed to be things that some individual could read. Remember, this is after the development of the printing press, so there start to be more and more texts available to kind of lay people or everyday people. It's easier to get access to text because text can be mass produced and distributed. So there starts to be this genre of meditations where people can read an author's kind of individual description of their experiences. Usually it can involve things like prayers. You think about what a meditation is, right? Even today, there are like guided meditations on YouTube and things like that. It's in the same genre, the meditations. It's a kind of guided process of thought. And that means that you, the reader, are being invited to kind of go through the same process of thought as you read, and I would encourage you to do that. That's a good way to read the meditations. I'll be kind of encouraging you to do that as we talk through the meditations in the video lectures. So I just want to let you know there is that the work Meditations falls into that genre. And the final point I want to share is that before Descartes published the Meditations, so there are 6 meditations. Meditations 1 through 6 is how we refer to them, and they go in order, right? So each one builds on the previous meditations. He sent these out to some colleagues of his, people that he knew in his network, and asked them to send them further out to other colleagues, basically to ask for objections. So he was inviting other theorists at the time, philosophers, scientists, people who are concerned about the same issues that he writes about in the Meditations. He was inviting them to provide feedback, provide critical feedback on his arguments. And then he, after reading their feedback, wrote up some replies to their objections and published the whole set together. So you think about what kind of publication strategy that is. He basically wanted to present to people, here are my arguments, here's my set of original thoughts leading to basically a position about what we all should believe as a prerequisite or as a sort of starting point of doing scientific research and thinking about theology and religion and what part we play and or what our place is in the universe. Here are here's my philosophy, here are my fundamental beliefs, and here are my arguments for those beliefs, okay? But then he also, along with publishing that, published some objections. Here are what some scholars at the time had to say as criticisms of my arguments. Here's where they were suspicious of my arguments or where they saw a potential problem. And here are my replies to their objections. That is, here's how I answer those concerns or those objections, those worries, those criticisms, and defend my view. So he must have a lot of confidence. He's sort of presenting his views as ones that he has a lot of confidence in, because he believes that even when criticized by others, he's still going to be able to defend his views. And he wants to share both the criticisms and his defenses with the audience of the book, that is, anyone who would read the book. Now, we will be reading in this course the Meditations. We may read a little bit of the objections and replies, but probably not much. I may occasionally refer to some famous objections and replies, and you can go on to read them more yourself if you like.